Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we've got Jason Lammers. He's a general manager at 420 Wholesale Pack, talking about the cannabis industry with packaging, regulations, everything in between, innovations. Jason, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So before we get to innovations, I kind of want to talk about the regulations. So this article from Marijuana Venture talks about common statewide packaging guidelines for cannabis products are, have to be child resistance, a clear indication and warning for content. You have ingredient lists for concentrates and other dosage and guidelines. There's uncertainty in the landscape for every single state. So it's got some operators and investors kind of just waiting to see what happens. So that maybe will give the cannabis packaging companies an opportunity to forge new grounds and innovative solutions for an industry where few standards for packaging exists. So being on the committee or at the head of the committee for the Cannabis Alliance, a local lobbyist group, you've been influential in your own right to kind of reduce some packaging waste. So briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, 420 Wholesale Pack, and how you've gotten involved in regulations down in the state capitol.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So at the Cannabis Alliance, I'm a board member as well as the chair of the Packaging Waste Committee. And with that waste committee, we've been active for about a year and a half now. And we initially formed back in, I think, mid to late 2018, essentially trying to address the packaging waste issues we have in our industry. A lot of regulations actually create more waste and don't actually limit that waste. They actually create more problems with waste concerns. And so we really started looking at the rules in place and looked at opportunities to potentially change some of those rules that would still maintain child resistancy, all those kind of safety factors that we're concerned about, but also actually do something for our planet and reduce our waste concerns when it comes to our packaging. And so we were able to identify essentially our bag thicknesses. Didn't need to be that 4 mil standard that everybody seemed to adopt. We even kind of got the LCB to essentially admit on record that they really didn't have any real science behind that standard that was initially established, and so they were pretty accepting of our ideas, and so they were willing to go down to a 2 mil standard to significantly reduce our waste impacts on our poly bags. And then we also addressed the dosing caps on our infused beverages. That's actually a market that's growing about 20+% per year. So while it's not a huge segment in our industry right now, it's going to continue to grow and grow. And so even currently, we're looking at almost 1.5 million beverages sold in Washington State, projected for 2020, and we got that information from Headset. And so using that data, we're able to go to the LCB and kind of show them the impacts that some of these rule changes could have. And so they accepted both of those rule changes, and it was a long process. It took almost a year to get it all done. But effective January 1, 2020, we got the packaging thickness down from 4 to 2. And then also got the dosing caps removed so people can still provide dosing on their beverages, but just in a lot more environmentally friendly way.
Yeah, there's so many regulations. Washington is going through some crazy stuff. They wanted to limit THC concentrates at 10%, and luckily the Cannabis Alliance stepped in and said that's a terrible idea. But with a lot of volatility, it's hard to get packaging and labeling, because if you're shipping it from China, it could be obsolete by the time it gets to you, which is even more important to have local products, local people like yourself that can provide solutions. And so I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to transition into something that you're about to have. I don't know how much you can talk about it, but there's another article from Benzinga about hemp bioplastics. And so obviously getting into cannabis and hemp packaging. So this article says that the hemp has a great potential to become a commodity in the packaging industry, not only for cannabis products, but for every possible kind of packaged goods. Yet the cannabis industry is becoming the ideal testing field for this innovative packaging material. So there's a new buyer that's agreed to accept higher levels of cost for what that packaging actually means to the environment, and especially true for the cannabis market, where consumers tend to gravitate towards the use of natural products that have a low impact on the environment. And so reducing the mill by half from 4 milliliters to 2, you've already kind of engaged in that. What else are you working on, or have you seen that's kind of a hemp bioplastic and removing garbage from landfills?
Yeah, so we're actually, we did look at some hemp bioplastic solutions actually a few years ago. We were really big on that space, but we ended up pulling back from those solutions because there's just not the appropriate waste streams to actually collect those materials and make sure that they biodegrade as advertised. And so We kind of put the pause on our biotubes, bioplastic options, just because the waste stream's not in place for our industry right now. And so we really started looking at, when we kind of came to that conclusion, we weren't willing to accept that as, okay, well, I guess we can't do anything. So we started looking at other solutions, and that's when we started really looking at recycled plastics. The nice thing about recycling plastics is, obviously, as we've all heard, there's tons of plastic out there already in the world that we can collect that stuff, we can clean it, shred it up, and turn it into new products. And so, and the nice thing about that as well is it's also cost competitive. That's the other challenge with hemp plastics, hemp and other bioplastics, is typically the raw material costs are at least 50% more than your typical plastic material. And so, in a very price-sensitive industry that's hugely taxed, has 280E implications, our growers just do not have the profit margins to invest in the more expensive bioplastic materials, even if we had the waste streams in place. And so that's when we started looking at recycled solutions. And we're going to be rolling out a joint tube that will actually be domestically made here in Washington, made from 100% recycled plastics, and it'll be cost competitive to the Chinese product, which should be a really big disruptor in that model, because it ultimately, to do the right thing, you don't have to invest more as a company. You can basically pay what you've been paying already with the virgin stuff that's not environmentally friendly, and you can start investing in recycled plastics, which is a much better solution.
So you've got a dude tube. Pre-rolls are one of the number one products sold. So you're saying that you have 100% recycled resin product that you can then sell, made domestically and cheaper than the foreign markets like in China.
Correct.
That's a huge opportunity. And so are people going to be able to then recycle these, or is it, essentially the same as a single-use plastic?
So the material is recyclable, but we do have challenges in that. A lot of people don't understand that a lot of items will say that they'll have a recycle symbol on there, but people will assume, oh, okay, I can throw that in my curbside blue bin and everything's great, right? Well, a vast majority of that's not correct. I mean, just because something is recyclable material doesn't mean it's going to get recycled if you just drop it in that blue bin. So there's a lot of challenges in our waste stream. It's really not a cannabis issue. It's really a United States issue. It really is a countrywide crisis that we have in our recycling systems. And there's a lot of investment going on to fix and improve that. But there are very limited factors when it comes to recycling. So we've sat down with waste management and had some really good conversations to try to come up with some solutions so that we can create some curbside recyclable solutions through the traditional waste streams. And so we're hoping to have something that we can announce with that. We think we've got a good idea, and so we've got a little bit more work to do on that, but hopefully in a few months we can maybe come back on and make an announcement on even further progress.
Definitely. We'll have to absolutely talk about that. It's a big industry. A lot of people don't realize this, but a report, according to Zion Market Research, puts the global cannabis packaging industry at $20 billion in the next 5 years. And so Marijuana Venture Magazine's article, The Buzz or No Buzz About Cannabis Packaging, kind of dives into that aspect. Is this going to be big business? So there's been more of a demand for packaging solutions for the fragmented and divisive cannabis market. The market can be broken up into two major components. You have THC-based products comprising most of that buzz, and then the non-THC products like CBD, processed from hemp. So with the rapid growth in the industry, cultivators, processors, packagers are looking towards a future of automated operations to meet the demand, as they're working to meet challenges such as specific regulations for labeling and packaging. On top of that, you've got the FDA that'll pay attention when problems rise to the surface. The recent vape crisis is a perfect example of that. And then you have the edibles. They pose particular problems, according to lawmakers, for child resistance, packaging and options. They're hard to find, expensive, or don't align with sustainability goals. And so what is your take on the big packaging getting into the industry? There's kind of a dichotomy, if you will, if we can use the same analogy for transportation distribution. The dichotomy within the industry is that cannabis specific will grow and expand. And then on the flip side, they think that existing transporters and distributors will just come in, swoop up that business, take all the market share away. As it pertains to packaging, do you think brands like 420 Wholesale Pack will rise above? Or do you think big packaging will come in and gobble you guys up? Or will you coexist?
I mean, I think ultimately you're going to have some of both. I think there'll be some of the distributors that are out there now, and distributors and manufacturers that have kind of been in the industry since the beginning or the very early time, that will continue on. But I think just like we've seen in our industry in Washington with growers, where there's been massive consolidation, we've got probably only half of our active licenses that are actually producing right now. I think consolidation is just kind of the nature of the business in an emerging marketplace like this, and so it's inevitable. I think there's going to be a lot of buyouts in packaging and consolidation. I don't think we've seen a lot of it yet, but I think it's definitely coming. And so, while now right now you see more and more packaging companies getting into this space, and so it's almost flooded right now. But I think we will start to see more and more the successful ones start to gobble up the other successful ones and start to buy up market share, just like other industries do.
Is there a lag between the regulated markets and the medical markets? It seems like the medical markets have a slightly different packaging need. There's a move towards sustainability. Medical cannabis packages are exploring that flexible pouches made from bags from environmentally friendly materials, as opposed to when I went up to the Lift Expo, I went to a medical, I'm going to put that in quotes, a medical store up in Vancouver, BC. And when I saw a jar, it was a cultivar I'd never seen before. It was a strain called Weed. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's a sativa or indica. So I asked the guy, is this sativa indica? And he said, weed is weed, man. And I was like, okay, I'll take a gram of that. So $10 a gram later, he seriously takes out a plastic sandwich bag, puts a gram in there and licks it and rolls it. And I was just like, yes, this is old school. I mean, it was disgusting, but it was so classic coming from the regulated markets for over half a decade. To see that, my mind was blown. It took me back to college or whatever. And so I digress, but is the medical industry, let's say Oklahoma or otherwise, lagging behind the regulated market for packaging?
They're very different. I don't know if they're necessarily lacking or behind. It's just a different marketplace. Full adult use states have regulations in place that require certain types of packaging rules. So that kind of helps drive the packaging that ends up being in states like Washington, whereas states like Oklahoma don't have any packaging rules whatsoever. So it really is up to the stores to determine what they feel is best. And I think we had that in medical in Washington as well. A lot of people just package it what they thought was best. So, you had maybe not necessarily the child resistant packaging back in the day. So they maybe weren't thinking in terms of that. But now more and more you're starting to see even, I think, medical states that are adopting kind of traditional adult use packaging, even if they're not required to yet. But I think definitely in the early medical days, nobody was doing CR certified packaging, with silicone slicks and, little plastic containers and little sandwich bags, like you said. It was very simple packaging because, if you don't have to invest in that packaging, why would you, right? And so very few people did. And we have medical markets we sell to. We have other states that we're selling, some of our old packaging that I can't sell to anybody in Washington State anymore because it's either not compliant or it's just not in style anymore. But you can go to a place like Oklahoma and they'll snatch it up in a heartbeat because they're just in a different place in the marketplace right now.
So this article says that they think there's going to be a lot of larger packaging companies acquiring cannabis packaging companies or working with them directly to distribute their products, as bigger packaging companies partner with smaller cannabis specific companies. And one of those could be Sana. So I'm curious, as some of these companies like Sana claim to be biodegradable, want to know kind of what your experience is. Sana is a provider of sustainable packaging solutions for the cannabis businesses that use hemp bioplastics and reclaimed plastics to manufacture environmentally responsible packaging products. But as we've seen, you can have a carrot buried in 10 feet of dirt, and if it doesn't have access to oxygen, it'll never biodegrade after 10 years.
Yeah, so that's definitely a challenge, and we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. Is even if something does biodegrade as advertised, which also is, I think, a challenge from what I've seen in my research. Even if you do have something that will truly work as advertised, you've got to make sure it gets to the right place in order for that to work effectively. And in our state, that's Cedar Grove Compost, and so they're an industrial composter. And if they won't accept the industrial compostable material, packaging material, it will not degrade as advertised. So people have this feel-good story. They think they're helping out the environment when in fact they're paying a premium packaging price and ultimately not helping the environment one bit. Because if a biotube ends up in a landfill, like you said, just like that carrot, it's going to sit in there for decades and not do a thing. So it's going to sit there just like the plastic does.
There's a serious advantage if you can manufacture something domestically that's from recycled products. It's cheaper than China. We're seeing that big packaging firms trying to take over the cannabis market could be disruptive for some smaller packaging specific companies that can't compete with the technology cost effective solutions of these larger players. So it's going to be people like 420 Wholesale Pack that have that first mover advantage, that create these innovative solutions like 100% recycled rosin made domestically, cheaper than China, in order to essentially survive and thrive. Is, again, first mover advantages with innovation.
Yeah, I mean, that's really how we looked at this. You know, when we brought this product out, you know, we really look at it as a product that we're competing with the Chinese marketplace. We're not competing with our domestic competitors, quote unquote. In fact, many of the people that are our quote unquote competitors in the United States are actually, we've had conversations with, and quite a few of them I think are interested in distributing for us as well. So, you know, the only way we can actually make a big impact in our waste issues, and the joint tubes being one of the biggest ones in our industry right now, is obviously for it to be a widely accepted product. You know, if you have a product that you sell a few 100,000 of, and it's an industry that sells, you know, tens of millions of them, you're really not making a big impact. And so having that price competitive advantage so that people can essentially invest in that product and buy into this concept without having to spend a bunch more money is the way to do it. You know, so you're not asking these growers who don't have the profit margins to do it in the first place to invest more.
Well, I'm excited to have you back on later this spring, in a couple of months, actually. And so you're going to have to come back on the Talking Hedge and talk about some more disruptive cannabis packaging as you get this 100% recycled doob tube and curbside recycling completed. I want to have you come back and chat about that.
Yeah, definitely. Would love to.
If anybody is interested, how can they find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can check us out at 420wholesalepack.com. Or we're on Instagram at 420 Wholesale Pack as well, or LinkedIn as well. Check us out, follow us online, check out our social panels, and yeah, check out our website, 420wholesalepack.com.
And as usual, all that will be in the show. All those links will be in the show notes. So I want to thank my guest, Jason Lammers. He's General Manager of 420 Wholesale Pack. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thanks, Josh.
I am Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.